Hey all, excuse me while I finish the last of my lunch. Just gonna give us a second here, see who shows up, if anyone. I could probably also tweet this out. That would be useful. Let's see here. There we go. Get a shareable link. Cool. Tweet sent. All right. Hey, everyone. Hi, Michael. Hi, KJ. Hope you guys are having a good day today. So I'm sure if you're on the internet and, not under a rock or something, you probably know about the Prime Day strike. Amazon is having their Prime Day, which is like a big sales event. And workers in their warehouses literally across the world are on strike today as a protest. There are strikes in Minnesota, where I live. There are strikes in Germany, in the UK. Basically, anywhere there's an Amazon fulfillment warehouse, there's probably a strike. And it's been a pretty big deal because, of course, they have the short turnaround. Amazon sells its stuff based on the idea that they can get their product to you in like under 2 days with free Prime shipping. And so if that bottlenecks, then they struggle to fulfill that, which means they can be subject to, returns or requests for refunds and things like that. And this, of course, is all over the media. And it is quite a treat because I feel like in a lot of ways, the entire world is struggling with something that the book world has been struggling with for quite a while. Amazon has long since been the biggest book distributor in probably the world, frankly. They own a huge amount of book distribution companies. So Books is owned by Amazon. Book Depository is owned by Amazon. Comixology, Audible, Brilliance Audio, even Goodreads, all owned by Amazon. So realistically, if you live in the book world and you want a book online, you probably have to go through Amazon or an Amazon affiliated company. So that has its issues. Just to give you a little bit of context about Amazon, part of the issues that they have kind of dubious, well, not just kind of dubious, they have some pretty sketch Zilla, like workers' rights kind of policies. They've fired people for trying to unionize in their warehouses. They have intense hours. People are required to walk like 16 miles a day without bathroom breaks, basically, if they are going to work in these fulfillment centers. So they're terrible conditions. The average worker there is making in a warehouse, not in their corporate office. In their corporate office, wages are much more competitive. But the average, like, feet on the ground, entry level average everyday worker is making something like $25,000 a year, which in the US is not enough to live at all. Even the cheapest state in the US, Mississippi, the average household income is $37,000, and most people there are living below the poverty line, at least a good third. And, that's in contrast to what their big corporation and their giant CEOs are making. Jeff Bezos his net worth is something like $165 billion. So his net worth is over 660 times the amount of money that the average worker in his sites are making a year. Big deal. And moreover, because they are on the edge of a monopoly, I would argue definitely a monopoly, there's no real alternative. And so we're stuck in this situation, aren't we? The takeaway, if you're leaving this anytime soon, is that, hey, Amazon is kind of sketchy despite the fact that they have fantastic customer service, and we should maybe not cross picket lines today. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the nature of capitalism, a little bit about what that means for us in books, and kind of some of the things we can do, because it feels pretty hopeless sometimes. It's like the story of 2019. It just all kind of feels hopeless sometimes. Every country deals with their economic system, their company laws, their corporate laws differently. The US, we're pretty stalwartly, at least rhetorically, in the capitalist side, which means that we talk a lot about the free market and, laissez-faire economy. Basically, a suck it up and deal with it. If you're going to be a company or you're going to be a consumer, like, it's a might makes right. But there are laws in the US and there are laws across the EU. There are laws in a variety of countries, especially in developed countries. It's much less common to get antitrust or anti-monopoly laws in developing countries, just by the nature of the economic structures. But there are antitrust, or also called competition laws in the US, which essentially mean that if your corporation gets too big, they can break you up. We saw this in the 1990s with American Airlines and AT&T. Standard Oil has been broken up before. Even Delta Dental in Rhode Island got broken up because they were a monopoly. Like, we have interfered at the federal level before with large corporations, but we're struggling right now with large corporations like Facebook, Google, Amazon, to find that balance, because I think the internet has really shaken the world to its core, she says, surprising no one. And so there's just this nature of the internet and internet consumption that makes it so easy to replace brick and mortar stores. We've seen this, it's kind of the analog to Barnes and Noble or large bookstores coming in and kind of wiping out the indie bookstores in the 80s and 90s. And now we're seeing that turnaround, right? There's always a bigger fish, and the bigger fish in this case is Amazon. And it's been slowly creating enough pressure that large bookstores like Barnes and Noble are shutting down. Fortunately, there has been a resurgence, or a minor resurgence, of indie bookstores in the modern age, thanks to things like Books Are My Bag and Independent Bookstore Day in the US. There's really been kind of some revitalization there, especially with the understanding that maybe book culture is more important than just the place that you get the book. Side note, if you're also on your lunch hour, or maybe your dinner hour, depending on where you are, you should let me know what you had for lunch. I had leftover egg scramble and potatoes. It was tasty, but it is also my second day in a row eating that. So let me be jealous of your food. Anyways, we're stuck with this fundamental dilemma of how do we support book culture when you are kind of strapped for cash. Right? As many people understand in a very real sense, you can't really beat the prices at Amazon. If you are a book reader, a book lover, and you want something new, specifically something new, there's not really a cheaper place to go. Oh man, potato bacon sausage sounds delicious, and so does sweet potato fries with like a honey barbecue sauce. Oh yeah. See, distracted by food constantly. And I think this is, on a personal level, this is a really big struggle because it seems like the easy answer is like, oh, shop at your indie bookstores, or oh, go to the library. But there are a lot of real structural reasons why people might not do that. For instance, indie bookstores are in fact more expensive oftentimes. That's just a fact because they tend to be places that sell themselves on having fairer wages, that sell themselves on having much more one-on-one contact. They have to pay for overhead for much more limited stock and buy things at regular wholesale prices, whereas a place like Amazon, when they're buying literally like 1 million copies of a book, can reduce that price even more than wholesale. And it's especially tricky because a lot of the places that you want to go to for your discount books, right, are also owned by Amazon, Abe Books, Book Depository. And there is the library, but libraries are often limited in their stock. In some places, you have to pay to use the library. And there are library fees that are often associated with anybody who can't, get stuff done on time or who are relying for extra resources. And those costs themselves can become prohibitive, right? I cannot tell you, when I worked in the library system, I have this just such vivid memory of this little boy coming up to me and saying that he couldn't check out a book and he was crying. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we have too many fines. They told me I couldn't do it." And so I had to, of course, go back, and we were able to work something out, but that kind of stress exists for people. And yeah, a lot of libraries can be outdated, right? They just can't keep up with demand or with, modern publishing. And so you're not getting necessarily new releases, or the wait time is really long, or things like that. So there are a bunch of kind of dynamics at play here. And I mean, again, I love the library. If you haven't seen my library lovers tag, you should go check it out. I'm a little biased, but it was fun, and we go to my library. And so we're kind of left at this place of like, what do you do, right? Because you don't want to torrent, because if you torrent an ebook, for instance, then you're not providing money to artists who are making that work. If you don't torrent, but you're buying, maybe an ebook, you're probably buying through either Barnes and Noble, right, the Nook, Kobo, or Kindle. And each of those is kind of a similar problem. Specifically, Kindle, of course, is owned by Amazon. Kobo is a DRM free, but is a little bit harder to get a hold of, from my understanding. I haven't used that system at all. And the Nook, at least here in the US, that's the other option, is the Barnes and Noble Nook. And that's just kind of Crayola wonder markers. Borders is no longer open in the US. I don't know if it's open in other places. I thought they had a full shutdown. And so, even when you do get to use those books, they're generally the same price as like a paperback. And I have this similar problem kind of deciding where the ethical line is, because again, I understand that a lot of people don't make a lot of cash, right? There's a reason you shop at Walmart all the time. There's a reason, we buy things online. And I say that as somebody who comes from a very high poverty kind of area, right? The people in my area where I grew up, it was one of the highest counties in the state for people on assistance. So what do you do? Right now, I'm fortunate enough to be in a spot where I can afford to go and purchase a lot of my stuff. And I'm also in a privileged position where I can often ask for a review copy, but that is, again, super privileged. And yeah, if you're into comics, like the cost of comics is extremely high and prohibitive. Libraries basically never carry them. And Comixology, which is the online version, is actually explicitly owned by Amazon. It is a little surprising to me that we haven't seen more of a push to break up companies like Amazon. And it's been a little bit different in the EU. I think they've had a little bit less of a contention over fighting with large corporations. They've certainly tried to take on Google. But it surprises me because at the time in the 90s when they broke up AT&T, people thought that was never going to be a thing. It was kind of a too big to fail mentality. I do buy a lot of used books. Again, that has its limitations in that if you're wanting something new, it can be a little bit more difficult to get a hold of. My area, you might be familiar with the concept of the little free libraries, which they look like little birdhouses and you fill them with books and they go in people's front yards and stuff. My area, those are very, very popular. They were founded, I think, initially basically on the border of Wisconsin and Minnesota. And so around here, they're very, very popular. And those have been a fantastic option. The library is really good if it's not something that I am in a particular rush for, especially through interlibrary loan. I would really encourage everybody to write their city council if you can, because there has been an increasingly large push, at least here in the US, to get rid of late fees at libraries. And St. Paul has just done that. They just got rid of library fees entirely, which is a fantastic, amazing thing for so many people, and really has increased library usage in total. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say that Amazon is not a good resource, because if you are, if you have a limited income, there's a reason why these options are popular. But when you have the option to not, and you have the option to go somewhere else, you should, I think. I'll go ahead and list a couple of, I have some local indie bookstores that sell online. I know not every place has indie bookstores and not every place has access to indie bookstores that sell online. So I'll link some of those down below. Abe Books, I would highly encourage you if you're going to shop there. Make sure you're shopping from like an independent vendor and not from Amazon, because they will sell their own books on there. Like there's the used stuff that people trade in. So double check that you're purchasing from an actual vendor, because a lot of indie bookstores do use Abe Books. I don't have a good option, honestly, for comics. Comics are just expensive in general. Better World Books is good, and they do sell ex-library books, so that's always a good option. If you can, you should talk to your librarian. Most library systems do a big book sale at the end of the year, and oftentimes they will sell review copies. So librarians get review copies, and they'll sell those review copies at library sales, which is a fantastic option. I'm a big fan of trading my books, but I have a super romantic idea of books that they all have kind of like their own lives and that they change with each person who reads them. And so I want to just spread love everywhere. You'll notice over time, if you just listen to me talk, that I'm a huge hippie like that. But I would encourage you, at least today, to not cross the picket line, and to explore some other options. KJ is saying in-stock trade is good for comics. And yeah, my library does also offer comics. Michael's saying that his does as well. On the Scoop has mentioned Script, which is great. Um, if you are interested in some, like, I know that the YA Source Books, who does YA, a lot of YA publishing, they grab a lot of their stuff from Wattpad, and I think most of that stuff gets left up. So if you're interested in, like, they do a lot of YA horror, which I'm endlessly fascinated with. That stays up, I think, on Wattpad. So that's a great option. RB Digital is, I think, the program that a lot of libraries, like, they partner up with, and that provides online ebook options for free. Then, if you can, spend some time with your used books places. And for me, in a lot of ways, this feels so much like the plastic bag issue, right? Plastic bags are, like, indisputably terrible for the environment, and yet they are used so commonly for things like food shelves, and for, homeless people use them as shoe coverings when they have holes in their shoes. Like, getting rid of them has some unintended consequences. I would just encourage you to spend the day thinking about what those consequences are with Amazon, and thinking about the creative things that we can do, using our online community. We have a really good resource there, and I'm excited about that. Anyway, that was just my thought for the day, something I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about. What are you guys reading, for those of you who are here in chat? I'm just finishing up The Raven Tower by Anne Leckie, which is exciting. It's her first fantasy novel. Oh, no one wants to talk to me? Or maybe my chat isn't loading. I will be doing a video at some point this year that's going to be about Marxism and communism. And I think that'll be really interesting. I'm going to do it right at the same time as I do kind of a capitalism video in science fiction. Looks like we've got Star Wars comics. The Seal of the Worm, book 10? Is that Adrian Tchaikovsky? Shadow of the Apt? I can never tell if somebody is saying apt or if they're, like, shortening apartment. Let's see here. Oh, wow, there's a whole wiki. Yeah, Adrian Tchaikovsky. I didn't know he had published this much. Huh. Caliban's War is good. Insect goodness. Nice. I love me some bug punk. And then after this, later this week, I'm going to be doing, just for a heads up, later this week, I'm going to be putting out my Reading Rush TBR, which I'm super excited for. I'm hoping to fulfill all of the challenges, but we will see. If you are doing that, you can hit me up on the Reading Rush website. Oh my gosh, it's like saying Irish with wristwatch. I'm having a day. It's a Tuesday, but it feels like it should be like Thursday. And awesome. Okay, so apparently the Tchaikovsky Shadow of the Apt is up there for you with Wheel of Time and Game of Thrones. And yes, the Stitch and Bitch is still a thing. We just haven't scheduled for the month yet. So we try and do once a month, depending on what our kind of collective calendars look like. It can vary from early in the month to end of the month. So we had a couple ones that were early recently. So we're balancing that out. July is kind of a hard month for a lot of folks, especially with the 4th of July. And then everybody's gearing up for Worldcon. My hope is to spend one of the afternoons before Worldcon starts this year doing a Stitch and Bitch where we're all in the same room. I've got my fingers crossed. I can't promise. But I'm going to try hard to make that happen because I know for a fact Rachel and I are going yarn shopping in Ireland. So that'll be so much fun to do a Stitch and Bitch in person with yarn that we got there right before con starts. And then maybe we can show what we knit at con. Because that would be fun. It always surprises me when I go to a convention and then like I can like look in any room and there's like 5 or 6 people knitting. It's pleasant. Okay, well, I am going to wrap up because I have to go back to actual work. But thank you guys for joining me. It's so nice to see you guys always. All right, see you guys later. Hit me up on Twitter.